I'm gonna got it. Everyone's gonna have to accept the thing, so I'll give people a second to do that. All right. Hopefully that was enough time for everyone to get set with that. Hello, I'm Laila Al Shanav Al Andalusia, or in the modern world, I'm Krishna Alexandra. I am a longtime SCA player. I've been in the SCA since I was in high school, actually. So, you know, I'm just going to say multiple decades. I've been around a long, long time. I've lived in 4 different kingdoms. I very recently moved from the East Kingdom to Atlantia. I've served as royal bard in 2 different kingdoms, in both Caid and in the East. Wait a little while. I'll try and rack Atlantia onto that list too, but not yet, and not this year. In the modern world, I am mundanely, I am also a singer. This is not something I only do in the SCA. I'm a professional opera singer. I'm currently getting ready to sing the role of Mother in A Mall and the Night Visitors with Shakespeare Opera Theater in the suburbs of Virginia, or suburbs of DC. So that's coming up for me in just like a few weeks. I am a dramatic mezzo soprano, and I specialize in Verdi and secondarily in Wagner. For those of you who know anything about opera, and I am also a voice teacher. I'm a private voice teacher. I have students both in and out of the. A lot of my students actually are people I know from the SCA, but who have a more serious approach towards how they do music, and I give a really good SCA discount if anyone's interested. Talk to me later. And I teach online primarily. I was actually teaching online even before the pandemic because I'm disabled. So being in a wheelchair means it's hard for me to access a lot of spaces, and it's a lot easier to work that way. But it also means I can have students anywhere in the world, which I really enjoy. I've been in music my whole life. My parents are musicians. I grew up in a recording studio in Honolulu, Hawaii. And my mother was a folk singer a la Joan Baez in the 70s, who almost had a really successful career and had kind of a near miss. So this has always been my world. Music has always been my world. And I was raised in an environment in which I was exposed to a lot of different varieties of music, which is really significant for the way that I look at music in general. Because in addition to doing opera, I do jazz and I do musical theater, and I do, I'm very comfortable singing across a lot of styles. And I've also spent the last 15 years mostly in the SCA focusing on Ladino music, which is Judeo-Spanish music. There's a lot of very complicated issues about dating it, but some of it is period if you know how to look, but very little. So it's a very complicated and kind of a controversial field, but beautiful music. And I also study period Arabic music, which is fascinating and was extremely developed, as well as early opera. As I mentioned before we started recording, actually, I'm also the director of Opera dell'Est, which is a inter-kingdom early opera company based out of the East Kingdom, but we've got people everywhere, and we use the 1650 extension, so we do a lot of Monteverdi and Carissimi and that sort of thing. So that's sort of my background. When I teach classes in the SCA, I talk about getting a period sound, but I will tell you from the outset that my techniques are not period techniques. We don't have a lot of information about period vocal training, to tell you the truth, but we are pretty sure it's better now than it was then. And I am more concerned with preserving your instrument than with using authentic training methods. Getting an authentic result and using authentic training methods are 2 different things. While we're working today, I will occasionally touch into a couple of very controversial areas, such as the use of vibrato in period music. I will say from the outset that there are multiple opinions on many of these things, and all I am able to share with you are my opinions. So do know that I'm there is no be all end all. There is no person who can put the gavel down and say this is the ruling. It is or isn't period. I think that there's a lot of evidence that vibrato is period, but there are people who disagree with me. And that sort of thing will come up all over when we're dealing with music, because we're missing so much information when we look at period music. We can see what's written, and we sometimes know traditions that led to now, but because we don't have recordings, because we can't actually see the performance aspect, all we have to rely on are descriptions of performances and guesses that we can make based on sort of peripheral information, which makes it a very amorphous field when it comes to documentation, when it comes to fully understanding what the period voice is. Not to mention, we often tend to think about these things monolithically when we should not be thinking about them monolithically, right? Because fundamentally, there were probably different traditions and practices in the Holy Roman Empire in Germany and in, the Persian Empire, the Safavid Empire. There were probably very different opinions in ancient Greece. There's no way that we can identify a single thing and be like, yup, that's what period singing sounded like. Even if we had a recording somehow through some gift of crazy magic, it would only be representative of one person in one place in one time. I bring a lot of that up in part because I'm one of the moderators for the SCA Bardic group. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about this question of, is there such a thing as a period voice? And my answer is no. Voices are voices are voices. And people have been experimenting with how to make their voice do different things forever. So we can't even definitively say that, no, there wasn't something that sounded like a Broadway belt. How could we possibly know that? We may know that there wasn't something that had the song form of a Broadway song, although that's not even true. There absolutely were. But I'm using that as sort of an example, right? We can't even guess really at what sort of vocal techniques were being used, except through like third-hand accounts. So that's sort of a big disclaimer. I know it's a lot, but I want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page of understanding that my goal in teaching you, my goal in being here today is to give you, first of all, some really good healthy techniques for warming up your voice, and some really good healthy techniques for singing, and also some tips and tricks for dealing with the hazards of singing in the SCA, especially at camping events where we are subjected to extreme weather and fire and smoke and exhaustion and sleeping outside and all sorts of things that can wreak havoc on our instruments. So I'm definitely going to talk about that. And then my goal is to work with you one-on-one and help you, first of all, to sing in the best way that you can, that is going to show your voice to its best, and that is also going to preserve your instrument so that you have a long, healthy life as a singer. And hopefully also help you maybe hone in on some repertoire that might be good for your particular voice, because I find that a lot of times people have a very limited idea of what period music is, and there's so much out there. So having a little bit of guidance on, no, try this direction may work for you, can be really helpful. So that's my main goal. I'm also gonna touch on one more topic before I start teaching you a warm up, and that topic is a word that sounds like a swear word but is not, and the word is fach. F-A-C-H. Fach. Now, here's why I am mentioning the word fach. This is an opera term, but opera has the most detailed version of this out there. Fach is a way of describing what type of voice you have. Most people, especially if your background is choral, your idea about voice types is going to be first and second, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, right? Outside of choral music, actually, the choral designations have very different meanings than even those same words do outside of choral music. So that's important to understand. Just because you sing alto in a choir does not mean you are an alto. Altos are really rare. Just because you sing second soprano in a choir doesn't mean you're a mezzo. Like it actually is just way more complicated. And choral singing has very specific ranges and very specific intents within those ranges. So it works very differently than solo singing. Like I said, I'm going to use the operatic perspective for this because it's the most detailed. How we determine our voice type has multiple levels. The first and most obvious one is the one that tells you how high or low your voice is. And the options for that are soprano, mezzo-soprano, contralto, countertenor, tenor, baritone, and bass. That's a very simplistic start because it gets more complicated from here. So even that, most of us think, oh, I'm a soprano because I can hit a high C, but that I'm a mezzo-soprano and I can hit a high D. So it's not that. What determines what your range is actually has more to do with two factors, one of which is what we call the tessitura, which is where your voice is the most comfortable and where you can sing for the longest without getting tired. And another thing called the passaggio, which in modern and non-classical terms is usually referred to as the voice's break. We don't think of it as a break when we sing classically. First of all, it's not just one note, it's actually a little range of notes. And passaggio is Italian for passage, which is what it is. It's a passage between the different parts of your voice. And the passaggio is a very tricky part of the voice that we spend a lot of our voice training working on. But the location of the passaggio and the tessitura are more important to determining your voice type than what your highest or lowest note is. And that's a really important thing to understand because it is not the extremities of our range that determine what our voice type is. The second factor in Fach, which is really important, is a descriptive term, which generally describes the color and weight of your voice. As you might imagine, this is not like a whether we're talking about whether you're a soprano or a mezzo or a tenor or a baritone, or whether we're talking about the weight factor, none of these things are cut and dry. And there are a lot of people who live in between spaces, right? There are people who call themselves baritenors. There are people who call themselves Zwischenfachs, who are people who are sort of a mezzo and sort of a soprano. They live in that in-between space. So there's a lot of gray area as we move between these things. And when we talk about weight or color, the designations, there's a lot of different ones and they vary depending on what your range is. But overall, we go from at the lightest end, coloraturas, who sing very fast, very light. If they're coloratura sopranos, they sing very high. And then we go up a weight class and we get, generally speaking, with women's voices, there's something called a soubrette, but it's really only women's voices. And then we get to a lyric voice. And from a lyric voice, which is sort of like a medium weight voice, we move into a spinto voice, which is heavier than that. And then from there, we move into what's called a dramatic voice. And then within the realm of a dramatic voice, at the very heavy end of a dramatic voice, we have a Wagnerian voice. And then there's sort of an extra classification, which is how I'm usually defined, which is a Verdi voice. And the reason that Verdi voices are sort of specific is because they have very extreme requirements. A Verdi mezzo has to have a high C. In general, mezzos do not need to have high Cs. So there are things like that can be determining factors. There are things called like a Helden tenor is a very particular type of heavy Wagnerian tenor. So this is an amorphous, wishy-washy thing. And the reason I bring it up early in the process is because I have found that deep down, everybody wants to know, what's my Fach? Tell me what my Fach is. And it's usually way more complicated than you think it is. I will try to give you an idea about what sort of repertoire you might want to look in the direction of. But if I say anything about your Fach, it will only be a guess. So I'm just telling you that right now. I can probably tell you pretty well where your tessitura is and where your best range is going to be. But when it comes down to it, Fach is tricky. And those of us who are in the opera world usually just wish it would go away because it's very limiting and puts you in a tiny little box. But now you have a basic like overview of some terms that I threw out real fast. Before we start the actual singing, which we're going to do in just a second, I'm going to open it up to any questions anyone has on the things I just said. No? Nobody?
I just see
I do.
comment.
People keep talking about their break, and I don't really know what that is, and I don't know what mine is. I suppose if somebody heard me, they could tell me, but I really don't know. Never taken a voice lesson in my life.
If you don't know what it is, sorry, go ahead.
I've never taken a voice lesson, just enjoy singing, so I don't really know.
So here's the thing. If you don't know where your break is or what it is, then it's probably not a huge problem for you, which is a good sign. But generally speaking, when people talk about their break, they are talking about, we usually think of our voice as being in a couple of different registers. If we're talking about it really scientifically, we call them M0, M1, M2, and M3. But in colloquial terms, M0 is what we think of as chest voice. M1 is what we would think of as a mixed voice. M2 is what we would think of as a head voice. And M3 is what we would think of as whistle tone, which not everyone has access to at all. And when we talk about those things, when we're transitioning from one of those parts of the voice into another, there is often a small range that is a little bit tricky to pass through. And that's the area that some people will call a break. And it's the area that in opera we call a passaggio. It is difficult, but it also is a very powerful area because you have access to more than one kind of resonance and you can make choices about how you're using it. That said, one of the reasons that people talk about it with horror has a lot to do with the a pattern that is very common in both Broadway and SCA fire singers, which is if you bring your chest voice as high as you can take it, then you will reach a cliff, after which you will fall off into your head voice, and there will be a sudden shift that goes from really strong to like breathy and airy, and there's nothing there. That is a result of a very particular set of choices that involve pushing the chest voice up higher than you probably ought to be pushing the chest voice up. And when you're doing that, usually it sounds really strained before you fall off the cliff. I don't advocate those methods. There are other ways of belting if belting is your goal. But when people talk about it as a break, that is often why they're using that term. It comes up a lot in the musical theater world because everybody wants to belt from their chest, and you know, most people are going to fall off a cliff at around a G, sometimes lower, sometimes a little higher, but it's very limiting. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Anybody else?
I see that somebody put in the chat. I know my fashion has changed.
Fox do change. They change a lot over the course of your life. That's a really important distinction, actually. The younger you are, the less secure your Fach is. But for anybody who knows these terms at all, you'll recognize the arc that I took. When I was 16, I was singing coloratura soprano rep. Now, interestingly, even then people thought I was a mezzo because I had a really large and warm sound as opposed to that sort of like light piercing sound you get from coloraturas. But my range, my tessitura, my passaggio, etc., what I was doing at that time was coloratura soprano rep. Now I'm singing Azucena in Il Trovatore, and roles that are like big fat mezzo rolls. I mean, big fat in the size of the voice that's expected. It's a massive shift. It's a huge shift. And that happens especially for people like me who have dramatic voices, because dramatic voices don't fully develop until you're in your 30s. So for a lot of people, they won't really discover what their voice is going to become until they're 35, 36, 37. Only then does their full voice sort of start to come into its own. A lot of people change Fach, not just in terms of weight, but also in terms of range, right? Like I said, I was a soprano and now I'm a mezzo. A lot of people will go from being a tenor to being a bass, or from being a baritone to being a tenor. There's all sorts of changes that your voice can go through over its life. So yes, Fachs change. It's one of the trickiest things about it, because you have to learn new rep, and also you kind of have to figure out your voice again when it shifts, because it feels different in your body. Any other questions? All right, I am going to move on to part 2 of this class, which is warm-ups. Now, the first warm-up I'm going to do is something that is going to work for some of you and is not going to work for others of you. And that's okay. Just want to say that right off the bat. It is called a lip trill, and some people just can't do it. So if you are having a huge amount of trouble with it, I'll give you a couple of alternatives for how you can approach this exercise, okay? Now, the reason we do this exercise, the reason we do lip trills is twofold. What a lip trill is, first of all, is this. The exercise goes like this. That's the exercise. The reason lip trills are useful is there's a few things. One, it actually loosens up the muscles around your mouth, which can get really, really tense, and which we really want to be relaxed when we're singing. We don't want any extra tension in that area. Two, it positions our lips in a forward fish sort of shape, which is a shape that we want to cultivate when we're singing, because of the way it actually moves some of the interior of what's going on in your mouth. Now, if you've taken this class with me before, you will note that I teach different warm-ups in this class at different times. And there's a couple reasons for that. One of them is because if you take my class many times, you'll learn new things. And another is because I'm always trying new things as well. And what you may not realize is most professional singers have a voice teacher, and most professional voice teachers have a voice teacher. I teach many people. 2 of my students are teachers. My teacher has a teacher. There's just like a whole train of teachers teaching other teachers. And because of that, I'm always learning new things. And when I learn new things, I will always pass them on to my students, always. So now the third reason we use lip trills is because they are part of a practice that we call SOVT. SOVT is incredibly important. And it is actually a very modern technique that I don't think even existed until like the mid 20th century. SOVT is semi-occluded vocal tract. That is what that stands for. And it is, you can probably figure it out from the name, but it basically means that you are singing with your passageway partly blocked. And it limits the amount of air that you can take up. It limits your volume. It limits a lot of things. Because it limits those things, it actually trains us to sing on a smaller, lighter stream of air, which is always the goal when we are singing solo. I know that this is technically sponsored by a choir, so I do want to point out very quickly that solo technique and choral technique do not always mesh that well. I teach solo technique, not choral technique. But in this particular instance, this is actually one of those things that is very different between singing in a choir and singing solo. Because when you're singing in a choir, you actually tend to use more air than you need, because it dilutes the voice, it disperses the voice and helps it to blend. Whereas when we're singing solo, we really don't want any extra air in the voice, because we want the voice to ring with a purity of sound that is going to carry without amplification. So, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises include lip trills, as well as humming or NGs or singing through a straw, which is a really useful technique, by the way. In this instance, We're going to do lip trills, but I'm going to give you 2 alternatives if you cannot do lip trills. If you cannot do lip trills, but you can sustain a rolled R, do it on a rolled R. If you can neither do a lip trill nor sustain a rolled R, then do the entire exercise on an NG, as in, which would sound like, it's not going to be very loud. All right? All right, so we're going to start from here. Are there any men in the class or lower voices in the class, actually? I don't. Oh, there's probably one. I'm guessing Seamus is probably a lower voice. So Seamus, you can go ahead and drop it down an octave. If anybody else is a really low voice, just feel free to drop it down an octave from what we're doing. Do it with as little breath as you can. Sometimes it takes a little extra breath to get that lip trill started, but try to experiment with how little you can get away with. I get false starts too sometimes. Last one. All right. Anybody have any questions after that exercise? No? All good? Some of your noses might feel really weird. That's okay. It makes your nose vibrate.
The only way I can do this is touching here. That's the only way I can do it without touching.
Sometimes manipulating your face is really helpful as you're learning to do different things with singing. It helps you in various ways. And I have no problem with you manipulating your face to do whatever you need to do. Just as long as you're not adding tension. That's the thing we really want to avoid is unnecessary tension. All right. All right, let's do can't decide what exercise to do next. All right. All right, we're going to do on the syllable E, and I want your E to be long. E, not E, but E. E, all right? And we're going to do, this exercise moves kind of fast, so listen first. It's going to go like this, and I'll sing it slowly first. That's the exercise. So it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's how that goes. And it's going to go a lot faster. So it's going to be like this. I don't want you to try overly to control it. You will notice my pitch may not be right smack in the center of it every time I do this either. Because you're trying to keep it sort of loose. And what we really want to focus on is legato. So what does the word legato mean? Who's going to answer for me? What's legato mean?
Smoothly, not.
Yes. Smooth, connected between the notes. So when we talk about legato singing, what we really want is we don't want it to feel like each note is a distinct little movement. We don't want we don't want that. We want it to feel like it's part of one long string. If you've watched people spin, which since we're in the SEA, most of us have, there's that feeling of drawing out that thread, right? That's what it should feel like, so that everything is connected. I am really stuffed up right now. All right. That's the exercise. Let's do it together. For a second. Is everybody doing pretty well with this? You're pretty comfortable? All right, we're going to add something onto it now. We're going to add one more part where it's going to go. So now it's a longer exercise, all right? It's a little trickier. It's a 9-note scale, that last one. So it's like a full scale and then an extra note just for good measure. All right. I'm not going to go up any higher than that. I'm sure some of you have notes above that. But hopefully that went pretty well for all of you. I flipped through the screen as we were going to see what it looked like, and I didn't see a lot of stretching, and I didn't see a lot of shoulders going up and down. So I think overall you guys are doing pretty well on this.
I really like this.
But let's talk about those for a second, because those both are really common things you see when people sing, right? You see the shoulders and you see the stretch neck, the giraffe neck. All right, so we're going to talk about both of those things for a second. What is the shoulders about? The shoulders is about breathing shallowly. When we breathe to sing, especially if we have a long passage and we need to get a really deep breath to make it through a passage, it is extremely important that we remember to breathe from a low place where we feel our back expand, right? Take your hands, put them behind your back, if you can do it without straining your shoulders. And I want you to breathe in, and as you breathe in, you should feel your fingers separate. It may not be as dramatic as that, but you should feel them pull outward and then come back in. If you do not feel that, then I want you to check whether you're feeling a rise and a fall in your chest and whether you're feeling a rise and a fall in your shoulders. How we breathe is more complicated than most of us realize. The lungs inflate themselves based on how much space is available. Now, this is the reason why people always talk about the diaphragm when they talk about singing. Most modern technique has pulled away from an overdependence on talking about the diaphragm because most people don't really understand what the diaphragm is, and they end up squeezing and doing some weird things around the idea of singing from your diaphragm. You're not singing from your diaphragm, you're singing from your lungs. But you want your lungs to fill from the bottom. And what the diaphragm actually is this weird, like, it's this really big flat muscle that can be like a bell shape, and it can also flatten out that way. When we talk about breathing from the diaphragm, what we're actually talking about doing is lowering the diaphragm, because the diaphragm is the separation between lower organs and upper organs. The lungs sit right above the diaphragm, stomach sits below it. So we want to lower the diaphragm in order to allow the lungs to inflate completely from the bottom instead of just inflating in the top part of the lungs, which is how you get shallow breaths, right? Because it's a I wish I had like a model bag to show you how it works, but it just sort of like it stays stuck at the bottom unless you give it that space, and then it automatically fills up as much as it can. So we want to make sure that we give our lungs the room to get those big deep breaths when we're singing. Now, at the same time, I have to tell you, you don't need to take an enormous breath for every phrase. And a lot of singers think they do, and then end up overblowing certain notes. If your phrase is short and you only need a sip of breath, then only take a sip of breath. But when we need those big long phrases, say if you're singing Handel and you've got like 12 measures that you need to get through somehow without breathing, we do that by making sure that we really fully expand the lungs by lowering the diaphragm to give them the full space to inflate. Now, while we're talking about anatomy, I'm going to grab a book to show you. I don't know where any of my things are. I thought I was going to show you a book. I'm looking for the vocal anatomy book. Oh, here it is. Got it.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. This is an excellent book. I highly recommend it. It is called The Singer's Guide to the Larynx. It is by Nicola Harrison and Alan Watson. You can buy it on Amazon. It is not very expensive. Most anatomy books do not give sufficient information for singers. When they talk about the ear, nose, and throat, and they talk about the mechanisms of singing, they do not talk about them in enough detail or enough depth to be useful to a singer. This book corrects that. Also, it has coloring book sections where you can color in and label diagrams, which is really fun, but also really good for memorizing parts of the voice. All right, so I highly recommend that if you want to know more about your instrument, which if you're very serious about singing, I think you should. I think it's important to understand our instrument as well as we possibly can. Now, that second thing, that stretching thing, there are a lot of things that we do as singers that are sort of subconscious in order to try to reach the note. In general, the less trained we are, the more likely that when we're trying to reach a high note, we're going to do this. But here's the thing. When you do that, you're adding so much tension in this area, and you're sort of like tilting the voice box in a weird way. It is not useful. It really isn't. It will add strain to your voice. It will make your upper notes sound like you're choking, and it also puts a huge amount of strain on your vocal folds. A huge amount, and you do not want to be putting extra strain on your vocal folds. When I talked about maintaining the health of your instrument, in large part what I'm talking about is avoiding certain things. The things I am talking about are nodes and polyps. These are things we do not want. Nodes and polyps are various types of injuries that you can get on your vocal folds. Vocal folds, by the way, is the correct term for what many people call vocal cords. They are not cords, they are folds. And those folds can develop all sorts of problems if either A, we use them roughly without adequate support, or B, we just use them too much. This is an important distinction because I want you to understand that there are people with excellent technique, excellent voices, and excellent habits who nonetheless end up getting vocal injuries because they sing too much. Adele has already had 3 surgeries, I believe. 3 major vocal surgeries because she works too much, she sings too much, and it blows her voice out. It's a huge problem on Broadway right now because Broadway singers are expected to do 8 shows a week, and some shows in particular are incredibly hard on the voice, and it's become, the surgeries that exist to address vocal injuries have gotten much better than they used to be. But part of the result of that is that people think that they can push longer and harder, and then if something breaks, they'll just go have surgery. And it's all kinds of problematic, as you can imagine. So this is my plea to you. Be aware, if your voice, if it hurts when you sing, stop. Period. If it hurts, something's wrong. And it could be that the something wrong is your technique. It could be that you're sick. It could be any number of things. But if it hurts, do not push through the pain. This is not a situation where pushing through the pain will help you. That is my plea. And if you have a persistent problem that goes on either for a long time or that keeps reappearing, go see an ENT. It's really important. And make sure you get a vocal scope. That is my plea for vocal health. All right. Let's do another exercise. All right. Let's do... This is a fun one. All right, we're gonna do ga 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 wee. That is the sounds that you will be making when we do this exercise. It's a hard exercise. Don't let the baby talk fool you. And there's a reason that we're doing this, right? Ga is an extremely difficult G. A hard G is an extremely difficult consonant to sing. It is. Trust me, in the opera I'm currently doing, in A Mall in the Night Visitors, I have this line where I have to sing all that gold up here. And it's awful. Singing the word gold on a G is like torture. Singing a G is easy. Singing gold on a G is bullshit. So that is my warning signal to Minotti, who is not with us anymore and cannot see it. So because it's a difficult consonant, we have to learn how to get around it, right? And one of the big things is that we don't want to allow the G. It's very easy for G to sit really low and guttural, for it to be g, g, g. And we want to move it for when we're singing so that it actually feels like it's hitting the roof of our mouth instead. We want to move the placement so it's g, g, g. Do you see the difference between those g and g? One of them is sitting here and one of them is sitting here. And a lot of the difference has to do with the placement of my tongue, right? The tongue is higher on g, g. And it's got a much lighter sound. It also, you can tell whether you're doing it correctly because you should be able to go ga, 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 ga without moving your chin, right? Ga, ga, ga. If I'm down here, it's going to be ga, ga, ga. And we don't want that. We want ga, 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 wee. Okay? So first of all, that's the ga part of it. Now, when we get to the wee, this is the other fun part. When we get to the wee, we want to feel like the voice is making this hook shape, like it's flipping into right here, the cheekbones, like the points of the cheekbones. This is an area that in singing we call the singer's mask. It's up here in the forehead, through the cheekbones, the upper part of the nasal cavity. This is the mask. We want to feel resonance in the mask when we sing because that brings in our upper overtones. Quick question. Does anybody not know what overtones are? It's okay if you don't. I see a couple faces that make me think that at least some of you don't know what overtones are. All right.
No, I don't know.
All right, great. So overtones are... this is an acoustical thing, and I'm not going to get into the science of it because, among other things, I'm just really not a physicist, and this is about physics. But in rough terms, when we play a note, we don't only hear that note. We also hear overtones that are above and below that note. And there is a specific order in which those overtones happen. First, we hear the octaves, right? And then next we hear fifths. Sorry. The fifth of that would be here. Do you hear how those things ring together in a way where there's the waveforms fit together? The overtone series keeps going. And in fact, if you want to understand how the overtone series is, it is related to the circle of fifths. And as vocalists, we have control over our overtones in a way that almost no instruments do. Generally speaking, the strength of higher or lower overtones on an instrument is determined by the shape of its body, right? The shape of the sound resonance chamber. However, as singers, our resonance chamber is our head and upper chest. I mean, it's actually our whole body, but the main part of it is our head and upper chest. This is the biggest part of our resonance chamber. So we can change the quality of our sound by changing whether we're slumped or sitting up. We can change the quality of our sound by changing whether our palate is raised or lowered, by whether our tongue is raised or lowered. All of those things change the quality of our sound and specifically change the overtones that are heard on the voice. And when we bring things into the singer's mask, we bring in upper overtones, which gives the sound what we call brightness, right? There's sort of this range from bright to dark on the voice. I'll show you what I mean. From the very dark end, we have, it's a very dark sound. I can take that same note and sing, and that's a really overly bright sound, right? I put it right in the nose and that gives it an aggressively bright sound. What we're usually looking for is actually a balance of those two. We're looking for, it's got a little bit of that brightness, it's got a little bit of that shimmer, but it's also got some of that depth from the lower overtones. We're looking to create that kind of a balanced sound when we sing. And that has to do with how we deal with our overtones. So we try to keep it out of the nose so we don't get overly bright, but we use the upper nasal resonance, but we try not to get that like super Mickey Mouse resonance. Higher overtones help us cut through and be heard. That's why one of the reasons why high voices can be heard more easily. But in the opera, this is really important because you need the upper overtones to cut through an orchestra. It's the reason why lighter voices that are piercing can still make it through versus the bigger voices that sometimes are darker that need more power in order to make it over the orchestra. So when we talk about this resonancy, what we're talking about doing is making sure that we have some shimmer, that we have some of those bright overtones coming in, and we don't get caught sounding like the old SNL church lady, right? We want to avoid the ooh, woo. It's like the owl sound. I mean, owls are cool, but we don't want to sound like that when we sing. So when we do ga, 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 we, E is always a brighter vowel anyway. So we're going to take that E and we're going to bring it right up into the cheekbones there. And it feels almost like you're throwing the ball, right? So let me show you what I mean. Ga, 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 wee. And you want to feel like you're paddling the whole way down instead of wee. We don't want those separated. We want it to feel like there's a momentum moving through the whole thing. So one more time, it goes ga, 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 wee. So I want you all to join me, and we'll do that, and we'll move up the scale as we do it. Ga, 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 wee. Ga, 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 wee. Ga, 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 wee. You might notice while I'm doing this that I'm going to occasionally move my head around like this, and let me tell you why I'm doing that. The reason I'm doing that is that I have a tendency that is sort of the opposite of the lifting up the chin thing. It's a really common tendency where I have a tendency to pull my chin in and my eyebrows up when I'm going for a high note because it helps me to find the spot. But it's not super useful and it adds a lot of extra tension. I'm trying to train myself out of it. And what I'm thinking about in order to do that, because if any of the rest of you have this experience, this will be helpful, is that you want your head to feel like it's floating. Right? Like it's kind of like a little bobblehead that can just sort of move around loosely on your shoulders. So sometimes while I'm singing, when I notice I'm going that I'm tucking the chin in and doing the eyebrow raise, I'm like, nope. And then I'll just start moving my head a little bit to try to keep things going. My neck is a little stiff, so it's a little rough today. Ga, ready? Ga 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 wee. Ga 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 wee. Ga 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 wee. And you really connect from the ga wee, right? There's a passing vowel in there that you can really use on the way up. Ga 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 wee. 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 One last one. Ga 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 wee. And if you're a mezzo like me, that high note might have sounded really shrill. That's because it's an A, and if you're a mezzo, when you sing an A, it sounds shrill. That's just how it is. You got to be okay with that. All right. Does anybody need to be warmed up higher than a B flat? Because we did a B flat earlier. Is anyone singing anything that requires you to be higher than a B flat?
No.
No? All right, great. In that case, we are going to move on to part 3 of today, right on time. So first off, let me ask, is everyone interested in singing one-on-one with me, or is there anybody who's just auditing? Okay, I see. I have to scroll. Yeah, do that thing where you raise your hand if you're just auditing, and then I'll count how many people are auditing.
I'm a maybe. My voice is so out of shape right now that I'm not sure I want to sing for anybody, but.
Oh, I understand. I actually completely get that. But what I'm going to say to you is, if you feel willing to take a risk here today, I know what it's like for your voice to be out of shape, but hopefully I can help you get it back in shape in a really positive way, and I would love to work with you. So don't feel like you have to sit out.
Okay.
Okay. So I only saw one hand raised, which was Maria.
So you want us to say we're gonna?
If you don't want to sing, do you want to sing one-on-one with me?
Yes.
Okay, then there's only, that was what I was asking. I'm assuming that you do, and I asked if you don't, and one person said they don't. So that means that there are 7 people who are gonna sing. The reason I'm doing this is so I can figure out timing here. With 7 people, let's aim for 10 minutes a person. It's gonna take us just past, it'll be like an hour and 15 minutes by the time we're done, especially if I take like an extra minute here or there if we're like in the middle of something. Does that seem okay to everybody? All right, so that's what we're gonna do. And I am gonna go through this list in the order that I see you on my list, if that's okay. Because then I can keep pretty good track of it. And unless there's somebody who needs to go early or who needs to go late. Does anybody have a need to go early or late? No? All right, great. Then the first person on my list is our host, Elias. So what I would like for you to do first, before we start, oh, you may not be able to do this automatically. Well, never mind. We're going to do the best we can. For the future, if you have your Zoom configured correctly for it, you can turn on Enable Original Sound during Zoom meetings. And that is extremely useful because then your voice won't cut out when you get high. So if you have that enabled, or if you are able to enable it from the menu, it depends on whether you're on a desktop or a device, I believe, as to whether you can do it during a call, then please go ahead and enable that now. If you can't, I will work around it.
Would you say again, what did you need us to enable?
Original sound.
Original sound. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to start with Elias. What would you like to sing today?
That is under audio settings, right?
Yes.
Let me.
Sure.
I know I have it somewhere because I've done it, but I can't remember now.
Okay, if you've done it before, then you may only have to go into the more setting inside the call, and then it should have an option that says enable original sound. Basically, the way it works is that in your main settings, you have to make it show up in the first place, and then on each call, you have to individually enable it. It's kind of a pain in the neck, the way it's set up. It blocks their filtration algorithm.
No, I don't see it. It's okay.
All right. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and start your 10 minutes. What would you like to sing?
Last weekend I performed at the Ren Fair in Las Cruces. Sorry, that was my daughter. Of course, perfect timing.
No problem.
Can you call her?
Yeah.
She needs to be picked up.
She's not there yet. But I can watch
Well, she's calling me. So I performed this one.
Okay. Lovely. Go ahead and sing it for me. I may stop you. Don't let that bother you. But go ahead and get started.
Abroad as I was walking one evening in the spring, I heard a maid in Bethlehem mournfully dancing. Her chains she wrought on her hands, and thus replied she, I love my love because I know my love loves me.
You're a lovely voice. Absolutely lovely.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. Is English your first language?
Nope,
What's your first language?
Spanish.
Spanish. Okay.
My daughter always says that whenever I sing, my accent comes out a lot more.
I noticed it a little bit when you were speaking, but it's very, very slight. There are some good things that your accent is doing for you, and there are some things that are getting in the way a little bit. Because the way we pronounce our words is so central to what our voices sound like. One thing that's working really well for you is that Spanish is a very frontal language, right? It keeps the consonants forward. It keeps the vowels forward. It's one of the reasons it moves so fast, right? It's a very, very fast moving language. Believe me, I speak Spanish, but I never understand when people are talking. I can read, but when people talk, they talk so fast I can't figure out where words start and end. But there's something really useful about that, right? Because it brings everything right to the front. It brings your enunciation right to the front, which is really excellent. But there is a thing that you are doing a lot where you're pinching right here, right there on the bottom edge of your lip. And And that pinch is inhibiting your sound a little bit.
Okay.
So I want to actually go through the lyrics. I want you to just say the lyrics to me, but I want you to do two things while you do that. First of all, I want you to think about bringing the lips out a little bit, like you're making like a weird fishy face. Just a little, not a ton. I don't do it with the hands because that's too much, but just a little bit, right? I just want you to think while you're singing about bringing the lips forward just a bit. And I also want you to make sure that every consonant is attached to the vowel that follows it. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it is much easier to sing in Spanish than
Give
it
me
is
one
to sing in
second
English.
because we have two people waiting. There.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
All right.
All right. So we want to bring the sound, we want to bring the consonants to attach them to the next vowel. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, what I was saying a second ago is that Spanish is a much easier language to sing in than English. English is
It is
a
for
nightmare
me.
to sing in. Like,
That's why I like
it
doing
is for
Latino.
everyone.
That's why I like doing the Ladino because it's much closer to my language.
Of course, and there's a lot of great Spanish repertoire too. Really quite a lot. There's some wonderful stuff out there. And Spanish is also very close to Italian. So you'll find that you won't have a lot of trouble adapting to Italian if you wanted to do some Italian repertoire as well. English is an incredibly difficult language to sing in. I think it's even harder than French, which is also very difficult. And one of the reasons is that we have very harsh consonants. One of the reasons is that we have a tendency to use diphthongs everywhere. But when we're singing, we have to treat it more like Italian, right? So what was the first line?
Abroad as I was walking
What's the first line of your song?
Abroad as I was walking one evening in the spring. Abroad.
Abroad as I was walking.
Walking.
Right? So here's what I want to show you is. Okay, so let's just do this one line at a time. Say that for me one more time.
Abroad as I
First line.
walking one evening in the
Okay. Stop after the first line. Abroad as I was walking is good. So here's what I want to do. I want you to approach this. First of all, let's go through each of these vowels. Abroad. Just say that.
Abroad.
Abroad. Abroad.
Abroad.
There you go.
Abroad.
As
I
was walking.
was walking.
Good. Now everything is much more in alignment, right?
Okay.
Before you were going in and out and in and out and in and out. And we want to actually refine it to where even the jaw is barely moving. Abroad as I was walking. Right? And when we get to walking,
I was walking.
yes. Now, if you curl the upper lip up a little bit while you do that, abroad as I was walking, then it'll bring a little more brightness in.
Abroad as I was walking. What do I do with
You're
the
getting there. It's just a little extra.
because the
What's
walking is going here.
Okay, so we don't want the walking to go there.
Yeah.
That NG should be very high. And actually, let's talk about NG because NG is an amazing tool. Just say for me. So is a sound that should be formed. There you go, with the tongue glued up to the roof of the mouth. See how much higher that is? Walking. It should be all up here, all up in the.
I can feel it now. Walking.
Yeah, now you're getting it.
Okay.
So what we really want to do is you want to take those lyrics and you want to smush them into a vertical construction. And you want to make sure that you keep that sound forward there and the soft palate raised all the time when we sing.
One
right?
question.
Go ahead
Is
and just
anybody-
sing the first line.
Is anybody keeping track of the time? The 10 minutes?
I am. I've got the timekeeper going.
Thank you.
Go ahead and sing the first line for me.
Brewed as I was walking.
Do you have any idea how much better that sounded? That was night and day from what you did earlier. And the only thing that you shifted, the only thing, was the way that you were pronouncing those vowels. Because when you shift the way you pronounce those vowels, it changes your shapes inside. You got to that high note much more easily. There was a lot more ring on it. It all lined up just perfectly. So I want you, let's look at the second line. We've got like 2 minutes left. What's the second line?
One evening in the spring.
One evening in the spring.
One evening in the spring. Spring.
Yeah. Spring. Yeah, it's kind of an E sound, right? So you see that when we sing, we move away from spoken English pronunciation and we really refine those vowels and we move away from diphthongs as much as possible. Instead of spring, because I is very low and it's in the throat and nobody likes that. E,
Spring.
everyone will hear it correctly, right?
Spring.
One evening in the spring. Go ahead and sing that line for me.
Brewed as
Sing the whole thing.
I have to do with it. Brewed as I was walking.
You stop, you lost everything.
In the spring.
You lost what we did on the first line. It went all wide. So let's bring it, we got to bring it in again. Oh, broad as I was.
Brewed as I
Yep.
was walking one evening in the spring.
Yes, 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 yes. That is night and day. And if you can apply those principles through the rest of the song and through your other repertoire, it's going to do wonders for you. It's so much clearer and so much brighter as soon as you do that.
And much
everything is
easier.
connected. And
was
also,
easier.
by the way, it should be. It should be. It should be much easier. The truth is that when we sing with good technique, it is usually easier. Good job. If you were in person, we would have a big round of applause, but we can't do that because you can only really hear one person at a time on Zoom. But that was really excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we have Fiora della Casa. Did I do that right? Fiora della Casa.
Hello, yes. See.
Now, I forgot to ask Elias, but are you okay with being recorded? Would you like us to turn the recording off?
Oh, it's okay.
All right. What would you like to sing today?
I missed the memo saying we needed to have something, so I'll just grab choral piece what I'm doing with the local choir and how about Zion? Yeah, Messiah. Okay. Since you've got a piano,
Sounds great.
can you give me an A? Okay.
Did you say this was from the Messiah?
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Let me grab the music. Can you grab my Messiah score, please? Which? It's the orange one. It's pretty good sitting there. Is it standing up or is it? I'm not sure. Thought we had it over here already. Bottom shelf. Orange and white. This one? Yep. There we go. All right. Messiah, which section are we doing?
What, 9, 10? O thou that tellest good tidings to Zion.
Got it. All right.
Go
ahead.
The longest soprano spot.
Here, I can give you the starting pitches. That's how it starts.
Ouch, that's high. Ooh, okay. Tidings to Zion, good tidings to
this is much harder than what we were looking at a minute ago, so we'll deal with it in sort of a small chunk.
Yeah, I've kind of lost my top couple of notes recently, so.
I was actually going to say, I wonder if you should actually think about switching to alto in a choir.
I think I might have to next concert. Mm-hmm.
I think it might be time. Your voice moves as you get older, and a lot of our voices get lower as we get older. My guess, based on some very specific factors, is that you're a mezzo soprano, but probably a low mezzo. There's a lot of wonderful material for a low mezzo as far as solo music goes. But definitely when you get up into this area, this whole section is in your Passaggio. We talked earlier about the Passaggio and the idea that it's actually a section of notes. Your Passaggio is clearly running from like D to G, which makes this whole section super uncomfortable. But I want to take the words out of it. I want to do the opposite of what we did last time, because in your case, because of how high this is and because of where your voice sits, the words are only going to make it harder. If you are able to, we can actually just do it on vowels, like just drop all the consonants from it, which would be like, right? Like just kind of moving through the vowels as you go through it. I want you to try that first. Just take the vowels out and see where it sits. Unfortunately, you're popping in and out a lot. One of the problems with singing higher material on Zoom is that Zoom just likes to filter it, which is super annoying. I can hear parts of it, but it's a little popcorny for me. But I want to really talk about how we approach those notes in the upper Passaggio, because it's hard. With the kind of voice that I believe you have, in that area, there is a path through that Passaggio, and it's really pointy. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Not really. Pointy.
So we really need to cultivate an edge in the voice, right? When we sing in that area, it has steel in it, right? If I sing over here, I can get a lot of warmth and a lot of nice big feelings. But when I get up here, do you hear how there's a sharpness to it? There's an edge to it. And that is in large part how we get through the Passaggio in that area, especially as middle voiced people who are in a mezzo range or in a baritone range. When we get into those Passaggio notes, we need to use those upper resonances, and we need to focus the sound. So I want... Let's just do an exercise in this area. We're going to do an exercise on an E, and we're going to use the E sound because E is a very pointed sound. The directionality of E sort of goes this way, and I want you to think about your E being tall and having a very lifted, soft palate, like you're yawning. And let's start here. As you go up to that high note, you got to really make sure you give it that space. I want you to bring the sides of your mouth in a little bit. You can use your hands for this. I just want you to really like monitor and keep it narrow, and think about lifting that back. Good. Think about keeping the sound high in the head. Think about keeping it out of the throat. I feel like there's a little bit of throat tension that's happening as you move up into the space. And we actually want to kind of leave the bottom alone entirely. We want to just sort of like, let all of that just hang, right? Let the jaw hang, and think about all of the sound as being in the palate and in the cheeks. To your question, Maria, original sound is definitely off for Fiora. You can only turn on original sound for yourself, but it's not always possible to do it mid-call, so she's sort of stuck the way it is. But I've worked through it before, and I will work through it again. This is a difficult part of the voice for that, because it has a tendency to get in the way. All right. Let's try one more. I may not be able to hear it, but let's try it anyway. Not bad. All right. So the height of this piece and where it sits in your voice makes it really challenging, the soprano part. There's another thing that will help you as you move through it, which is really cultivating that sense of legato. When we're dealing with Handel, there is a strong tendency to like stick H's in the middle of everything, right? Right? To go tidings, right? Tidings. We don't want that. We want to really connect everything. And in fact, let's skip the high notes for now so that we can actually hear you a little better. And let's look at that measure. Tidings. So first of all, when we're dealing with English, we want it to be tidings. We don't close that I until the last second before the D. And second of all, we want all those notes, that whole string of notes, to be continuous and connected to one another. Tidings. Try that for me.
Tidings.
Good, good, good. That was nice and connected. Now, what I would like to do is see if we can shape it a little bit better. I want to think about having that soft palate raised. Yawn for a second and feel that space that you get when you yawn. And there's a lot of like weird extra movements that are happening in your jaw where you just like randomly, suddenly it goes to the side or it like moves a little bit, which is an indication of tension. That's all it is. It's just an indication that you've got tension going on in that area. So you got to really work on releasing that. Tidings, tidings to Jerusalem. Let's hear that whole phrase.
Tidings. I haven't
I
memorized.
messed up the word. It's tidings too. It's my fault. Yes.
Tidings to Jerusalem.
So much of this is about how you are pronouncing words. Tidings, ings, not ings, but ings. Make it like a long E. Tidings to Jerusalem, right? The first part of Jerusalem should not be an open E. It should be what we call a closed E, which is like the Canadian A.
Yeah.
Right? Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
So it's not Salem, it's Salem.
Jerusalem.
There we go. Now, if we bring everything in line there, tidings to Jerusalem. That's going to really refine the whole sound. Try that for me.
To Jerusalem.
Better. Be careful about the two. The two is it's ooh and not It shouldn't be it should be ooh. Tidings to. When we speak, we often just say ta, but when we're singing, it's got to be to. Tidings to. One last thing, because we're out of time, but one last thing in general about Handel, and this is true for a lot of period English music as well. Roll your R's, well, or at least flip your R's. Don't try to sing an English R the way we think of it. Always flip the R's when you're singing. It's 1,000 times easier. and it'll keep your placement. Good job. Really good job. And, switch what you're singing. I think you're going to be so much better off when you start looking at some of the lower music. Also, long term, I think you should look at troubadour music, the French trouvères. I think it would suit your voice. You got a lot of warmth in your voice, and you've got a lot of body in the voice. And the Trouvère songs really thrive on that. Plus, I think that you're actually going to sing a lot better when you're not singing in English. Don't get me wrong, French is also terrible to sing in, but terrible in a different way. And because it's not your first language, it'll be easier for you to adapt to the way that you need to sing in it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. All right.
I believe.
Next.
I believe.
What was that?
I believe Maria wants to sing now.
Yay! All right.
Okay.
Well, let's do it.
Hi everyone.
Does that mean you want to be put back on the list, or that you want to go right now?
If I want to what? Sorry?
No, she wants to she wants to be back on the list. It doesn't have to be right now.
Okay, then I'll keep going through in the order that I have, but I'm so happy that you want to sing. I think that's going to be wonderful. All right. Next up, in that case, I have Lizbeth of Spinning Winds.
Hello.
Hello. I do not have for you.
I am sorry, this computer does not have a camera.
Okay, that's all
I
right.
am not,
It is a
I am
little
not
bit-
hiding from you. I'm just unable on this computer.
No, it's no problem. I can't see your face, so it's going to change a little bit in terms of how we have to approach things, but I will work with it. What I would love, though, is if you could do like a small mirror you can grab so that you can see yourself.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Lisbeth, do you want to be recorded?
That will be fine.
All right, what would you like to sing today?
I have a piece I have sung in church that happens to be from Est's whole book of Psalms from 1592.
Fantastic. What language is it in?
It is in English. I do sing several Latin pieces, but I sing first alto on those in a chorus, and that's probably not what we're aiming for right now.
Agreed. This is perfect. I just like to know what's coming.
Right, and I have sung everything from barbershop baritone, which is roughly equivalent to a mixed chorus tenor, up to second soprano,
Yep.
and I have no idea where I really should be.
Interesting. All right. Well, I look forward to examining that with you.
I
Go ahead
read
and sing
music,
when you're
so
ready.
I get tossed. So I get tossed wherever they need me.
Oh, I understand. I have sung everything from soprano descent to. Right, there's a bunch of extra sounds coming in all of a sudden.
I apologize.
Oh, that's me. I'm just on a delay. It's okay. It's just slightly distracting. Go ahead and sing.
Prevail, the pieces of a bond brought here together by our friends. In music we are bound. Forgive, we know each other's faults, as we our fears release, and let us cheer each other well. And I'm sorry, I have a filk set of words and I've just lost the words, so we'll go back to the Christian ones.
Okay, that's all right. You basically have been through it one time through. So the first thing that I noticed, go ahead and stop. That's enough. The first thing I noticed is that I don't think you're using enough air. And I don't think the air is moving fast enough. Because what's happening is that there is an unsteadiness in the voice that sounds like you're having a hard time keeping it aloft. So I want you to think about it this way. When we're singing, our voice, we're like surfers, and our voice is riding a wave of our air, right? And if that wave, if the air that we're riding on collapses, then the voice also collapses. And if that wave isn't moving fast enough, it doesn't have the means to keep you aloft, right? There has to be this momentum that holds you through it. So I want to go ahead and we're going to move off of the song for a second. I want to do a vocal exercise with you instead. And I want your focus on this exercise to be on making the airflow faster. And what should be a natural result of making the airflow flow faster is that your voice should also be louder. So you can approach it from either side. You can think about it both ways, but I want you to think about singing at least twice the volume of what you were singing before. And I want you to think about keeping that airflow really fast. And we're going to do just a 5-note scale, very simple. And we're going to do it on an ooh. Ooh. And the reason we're doing an ooh is because you can really feel your airflow on that. All right, go ahead.
Ooh.
Good. And that's definitely what's happening. I can hear it happening. Right now, there's a little bit of a, like you're stepping on each note. And I want it to feel a little bit more like there's a progression, like it's moving through all the notes rather than each note being a stop sign, right? So let's do it here. At this time, think about the notes all being connected to one another. Ooh. It's okay if it's muddy.
Ooh.
Yes, it's so much better. Let's keep going.
Ooh. Ooh.
Good. As we move up towards those top notes, think about lifting the soft palate. It's that yawn feeling, making more space back here for your voice to land.
Ooh. And I went back to stopping on every note. Let me try that one again. Ooh.
Yeah, you lost the air that time too.
Ooh.
That was better, but I want you to do it again, and I want you to sing. I want you to sing louder and faster on this one. Ooh.
Ooh.
Good. Don't be afraid of cracks. Cracks are not a big deal. As we move through the passaggio, they are entirely natural.
Ooh.
You're moving into your middle voice here, and I want you to. There you go. I want you to allow it to move into that upper space, and don't try to hold into the chest voice. There's a yawny feel, right? Ooh. One more time.
Ooh.
Yes, it's better.
Ooh. Cracking. Ooh.
You're doing really well. I still think nerves are getting in your way a bit. I can feel the nerves cutting into your air as you move through this area. Try
Yeah,
and
I'm
relax.
a
Take a
little
nice
afraid of
deep
these high
breath.
notes. I'm actually taking a really deep breath.
I
I'm a flute
totally
player.
understand.
I'm a flute player, so I know how to belly breathe, and
Okay.
I can breathe enough that my floating ribs move. It's what I do with it
Yeah, that makes
vocally
sense.
that I'm still learning.
Flute players have a lot of yeah. Yeah, of course. Flute playing is really advantageous for singing. Great that you play flute. Um, it teaches you a lot about how to get that nice, fast, clear, cool stream of air. So I want you to actually channel your flute playing more on this. I want you to think um, about how you play high notes on a flute, and I want you to try to bring that in here. Does that make sense?
It does, because I'm getting my soft palate out of the way and tightening the airstream with the lips, and so I probably need to get the soft palate out of the way
Yeah.
here.
That's exactly it. Go ahead and give that a shot. Let's try. Yes, that's so much better. Let's do one more. You have these notes. I know they seem scary to you, but they're easily in your range.
Let me try that one again.
Very good. It's okay. And look, you got a little crud up there in that area. It's probably because it's not a part of your voice that you use that much. Um, when you bring that focused airflow and you bring that soft palate up, when you apply the principles that you know from playing flute into your voice, that stream comes out so much more clearly. I wish we had more than 10 minutes to work because I think that there's a lot of pieces that once they fall into place for you, they're going to make everything makes so much more sense. You're going to have so much easier time singing because you've got a really good instrument, but you're barely using it right now. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
All right. I'm afraid we are out of our 10 minutes, and I am sad to move on, but you are in my kingdom. So grab me at a future event, and we can totally sit down and do a little more of this.
Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So I know that might have been a little weird for everybody because we had some challenges on time with that because of the back and forth. Margaret Junk is next from Eldemir.
Hello. I will not be singing in English, so this will be this is a performance I'm doing for a Kingdom event called what's it called again? Damn it, Queen's Prize Tourney. And yeah, this is the oldest song in recorded Chinese history. So let's see how this goes.
Oh, how cool! Before you start, are you okay with being recorded?
Yes.
Awesome. All right.
I'm working on my mixed voice right now.
Fantastic.
Okay. 今夕何夕兮，千舟中流。今日何日兮，渔翁自同舟。梦晓北好兮，不知沟池。心悸烦而不觉兮，则知忘字。山有木兮木有枝，心悦君兮 山有木，兮木有枝。心悦君兮君不知。心悦君兮君不知。心悦君兮君不知。
That was beautiful. Now I know how Greg Grimsley felt when I sang a Russian aria in my last master class, and he was like, "I don't know Russian, so this is going to be tricky."
This was originally my first
I don't know
language.
Chinese, so
I
this
lost
is
it.
going to be a little. Really?
This
Oh,
was originally
fascinating.
my first language.
So
It just
I've sung in
I lost
Japanese, but I've never sung in. Chinese is a really tricky language when it comes to singing, and it makes it a little bit tricky to coach through it, right? As somebody who is not a Chinese speaker, because the language itself forces you into certain mouth positions that are not optimal for European classical singing. Which is why Chinese classical singing has its own specific tradition that works with that. However, I think there are still some great things that we can work on. I'm not going to bother working with you on vowel position or pronunciation or anything, because I think that if I did, it would potentially change the meaning of what you were singing, and I don't want to do that. But there are some other things that I think could really make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I believe that you can sing that with your soft palate raised without it changing the vowel in any significant way.
That's
And right
something
now,
I'm
your
still
soft
working
palate
on.
is extremely. Yeah, your soft palate's really depressed while you're singing right now. And because your soft palate is depressed, it just prevents you from getting that extra level of resonance, right? It's not preventing you from getting the notes out. Your notes are clean, the melody's clean, the pitches are clean, all of that is fine. But we're not getting that like additional element of resonance that you build in when you lift the soft palate and you get that sort of cathedral, acoustic quality in that upper area. So if you're able to raise the soft palate while you're singing, that's going to make a big difference. The other thing is you are having a problem with the ends of your phrases. Do you know that you're having a problem with the ends of your phrases? Is it because you're running out of breath?
Yep, I'm running out of air. My air capacity in mixed voice is lower than chest voice.
It's interesting because you don't sound like you should be running out of air. You're not leaking a lot of air the way is often the case when someone is running out of air. But
And this is a
you're
very,
not
very
singing with a
legato
great
piece.
deal of. Yeah. And the legato is great. The legato helps. But you're not singing with enough support, I think. I think that's where this is falling apart. Now, support is a really complicated concept. And in vocal pedagogy circles, it's something that gets debated endlessly. But broadly speaking, actually, I want to try something. I think you may be having a problem because of the way that you were trying to hold back your air. I think that now that I think about it, the more I'm going over what's happening, I think the reason you're running out of breath may be that you're trying to control the air and the sound so much that extra muscle control that you're exerting is reducing your airflow, and it's also preventing you from getting a nice deep breath before each phrase. So I want you to start this one more time, and I want you to try something that is going to seem extraordinarily counterintuitive. I'm just going to tell you that right now. This is a really counterintuitive process. What I want you to do is I want you to sing it and literally try to give away all your air all the time. Just try to blow out all your air and and not stop. See how that goes. It sounds weird, but trust me, this is a useful technique.
Okay, let's see what happens. Jin xi he xi xi, 剑舟中流，今日何日
Welcome back again.
兮？再与王子同舟。
Okay, you started out, pause for a sec. You started out doing it and then you scared yourself and then you stopped doing it. But I want you to note that on that first phrase, you had plenty of volume and plenty of air. So I want you to start again and I want you to not give in to the giggles and really keep doing that. You're going to be singing louder and it might feel really weird for now and it may not feel as controlled, but I want you to try this anyway.
今夕何夕兮？剑舟
More.
中流，今日何日兮？
You are definitely not taking big enough breaths between phrases.
Yep.
That's one of the things that's happening. When you're in between phrases, I'm not seeing, there needs to be a real, like you need to expand the back and you need to really allow that air in. Because right now you are starting exactly the way I wanted you to, and then it goes away almost immediately because you're not continuing to refill the tank the way you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Start from the second phrase if you can.
今夕何日兮？再与王子同舟。Wait.
Okay, take it off of the language for a second. Let's do it. Let's do it on an E. Let's take the Chinese out of it altogether.
Okay.
I don't know if I got that melody right, but whatever it is. Okay, so you totally have enough air.
Okay.
You absolutely have enough air. You do. When you did it that way, you had no problem getting through the phrases. Yeah, and I think that the language and the way that you're focusing on the language may be interfering with. It's like learning to drive, right? You're thinking about too many things at once and you can't keep track of all of them at the same time. So you can work on it without the lyrics and then bring the lyrics back in. That's a useful way to make sure that everything is connected up the way it needs to be. It sounds great. It's a really cool piece. And I love that you're bringing this into your kingdom. And there's definitely
Also,
like unique challenges
rights,
because of the Chinese.
Also for bragging rights, this is from about 150 BCE.
Wow. That's cool. It's a beautiful song too. I mean, it's a really gorgeous melody. I think this is a really cool piece for you, but I do think that singing in Chinese has extra hazards that you have to just like figure out how to navigate around. One other thing I want you to think about, and this is a thing that I am not certain of because it may be a linguistic thing, is it possible to move it a little bit out of the nose? Does that make sense? Or is that nasality super important? When we
The
sing in
nasality is
French,
not
we
super
don't do
important.
nasal. What was that?
The nasality is not super important. It just
Okay, then try to bring it out of the nose.
Yep, that is the challenge. Nose, upper
Got it.
palate, breathing.
Yeah, the thing about we want to try to move it out this way a little bit, right? Nasal languages that are inherently really nasal prevent some really unique challenges. I sing in French a lot, and French, we actually don't use any of the nasal sounds when we sing in French, which, if you speak French, is really weird and confusing. But that's how it is. So I would suggest practicing trying to think about moving it from the nose up into the mask. It's not a big shift. It's really not. It's a really slight shift. And a lot of it can be done mostly by visualizing the sound vibrating in a different place.
Okay.
All right. You
And
were
what kind of
great.
voice is
I wish
this?
I had longer with everybody.
And what kind of voice is
What was
this?
that?
What kind of voice is this? I don't know what I am. Since I can sing baritone and
You are
mezzo
probably a
soprano.
mezzo soprano.
Okay.
You're probably a mezzo soprano, I think.
Okay.
As far as what type of mezzo soprano, who the hell knows? I'd have to hear you a lot more and a lot longer to be certain. Right now, you're singing with a very small voice, but I think you've got a big voice underneath that. So that's something to explore on non-Chinese repertoire.
Yes.
Italian. Take a look at some light period Italian. There'd be some good stuff for you in there. There's some really nice art songs by Francesca Caccini. Francesca Caccini is fantastic. Check her out.
Give me love songs. I specialize in love songs.
Well, there's tons of love songs, and Francesca Caccini wrote a lot of art songs. I like her because everybody always does her brother's stuff. Giulio Caccini is her brother, but I like giving the representation to
That's usually
Caccini, Caccini, for the
that's
person who
usually
just
the
typed it in.
case. They would do the male rather than the female.
Yeah. But she wrote great stuff. Francesca Caccini wrote beautiful, beautiful stuff. So definitely check that out. I think it'll be great for you. Yes, that is correct. The way that it is now written. Maria, you are next.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for
How are
having me.
you?
Nervous.
Okay, so first things first, take a deep breath.
Okay.
Take a deep breath. Let everything go. You don't have to be nervous. This is a safe place. Do you want us to turn the camera off or the recording off for you?
No,
You
it's
fine?
okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I'm fine. I'm gonna stand up.
All right. Standing up is good.
I have here the sheets. So I'm gonna sing "Summertime" from Porgy and Bess.
Sure.
Summertime, and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy's rich, and your mama's good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. Ooh, this morning you're gonna get up singing.
Go ahead and stop. We don't need to do the second verse.
Okay.
But we'll stick with the first verse for now. What is the starting pitch supposed to be on that? I think this is the wrong key. Can I see the music real quick?
Yeah. No sé si se ve aquí.
Okay, got it. All right, you were just about a half step below it. That's fine. You can put it down. So it should be here. So just try it there for a second. I just want to hear it in the right spot. Keep going. There you go. It's fine in that key. That works just fine for you. So I have a couple questions for you. First of all, how old are you?
26.
Where are you from?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. So your first language is Spanish.
She's my
Yeah.
niece.
Oh, okay. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Whenever we're dealing with singing in a language that isn't our first language, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. You have a really good instrument. You have a really beautiful instrument. Your voice sounds really lovely up there, but you're really limiting it right now. You're singing with like a really small part of what is available to you. So I want to try something with you. I want to try, let's start it here, actually. I want you to sing a minor triad down, and I want to do it on an ah. So we're going to go, just like that, all right? Can you sing that for me? Beautiful. Oh, you've got such a nice, clear tone up there. It's really good. Now, I want you to think about yawning before you start. I'm going to go, feel that yawn feel when your soft palate gets really high. And I want you to go, try and feel how that feels if you sing that with that lifted palate. Yes, there's already so much more body there. One more time. Beautiful. Let's bring it down a half step. Give that first note more body. Give it a little more energy. Make sure you lift that soft palate and let it ring. Yes, much better. But try to keep that lift even as you go down. Keep the position that you start with, try to maintain it as you go down. Yes, now you're getting it. Give it more resonance up at the top. You've got more room there. Give it more space. Beautiful. All right, one more. Good. Now we've made it down to where summertime starts. Summertime. That's where that sits. Just sing that. Good. Now, the way we should pronounce the word summer there is very loose, right? So instead of summer, we're going to say summer. Summer. It's actually it's more is actually how you're going to say it. Summer. Try that. Yes. Oh my God, that sounds so beautiful. There's so much more sound there now. You've got a lot of sound there, and you just haven't really tapped into it. I want you to really start singing with the fullness of your voice. I want you to start accessing that the large quality. You've got a big voice, especially given that you're only 26, because your voice is going to keep getting bigger for about the next 10 years. You have a very large instrument, and in my experience, people with very large instruments often sing very small because they're afraid of their instrument. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And I think you came into it sort of that way, where you're like, oh my God, there's so much, and you just try to like creep in. But when you have a big voice, if you try to do it that way, nothing comes out. And you end up with this weird, like tight instrument. And what you really need to do is just like, let it loose, let it out. Look, outside of the SCA, I would say that you should be, I would tell you to look at, Menotti, Giancarlo Menotti. There's a opera actually that is called The Medium that has some arias in it for a young woman, like a 20-year-old woman, that I think would really suit you. Flanking on the names of her arias right now, but hang on, I will find out. I can look things up and give you the information you need. Stupid keyboard is not working. There we go. The Medium aria. All right. My internet is very slow here in Virginia. Give me a second. Here we go. Yeah, you've got a big voice. You've got a lot that you can do with that instrument. Monica's Waltz. That's what it's called. It's an aria called Monica's Waltz that I think would really suit you, actually. I haven't looked at it in years, so I can't quite bring it to mind right now. As far as doing SCA rep, I think that you need to focus on things that are good for bigger voices. You would also do well with Ladino music. Ladino music would be good for you. But you can also look at things like the Cantigas de Santa Maria and the late period Italian music would also really suit you because a lot of it's for a bigger voice. Yeah, you have a really good instrument. I mean, there's a lot there. I think there's more there than you realize. Have you ever sung before?
Yeah, since little, thanks to my aunt, Elliot.
Well, I hope I see more of you because I think that you have a real talent. If you cultivate it, I think it'll really go someplace. So,
thank you so much.
Really good work today.
Thank you.
You are extremely welcome. It is nice working with you, and you are a very sweet person too. It's really lovely. All right, Muriel is next. Muriel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so correct me if I got that wrong.
You are pronouncing it correctly.
Woohoo! What language is that? Muriel Atalinde?
Muriel,
Is that German?
It's Middle English. Watch me fall over. At the linden tree.
Oh, okay, got it.
So there
Middle
is a
English.
German,
Middle English is always sort of. It's confusing. You look at it, you're like, it kind of looks like German, but it's not really German. I don't know what I'm looking at. All right. So where are you from?
I am from Unstiora.
Fantastic. Ostera, is it all Texas or is it also Oklahoma?
Texas and Oklahoma, which Oklahoma just branched
Okay.
off. It got its own principality, so they're all excited.
Ooh. All right. So what are you going to sing for me today?
I have got the Middle English carol Eddie Beofu.
Would you like to be recorded?
Fantastic.
Yes, I'm okay with being recorded. It's been so helpful watching you work with everyone else that
That's why I like this class, because honestly, everybody learns from everyone. That's how master classes work in general. And this is structured just like that. So, all right, I can't wait to hear you. Do you need a pitch?
Folkes fröhendingles bliss, Moder und women mine and kleine, switching world non overnis, on the heat is swelleth sin of all the women who has the breeze, me sweet lady here be been, and thou of me if thee will is.
You have such a sweet voice. Oh, I love it. It's so pretty. And Middle English, fortunately, is close enough to German that I think we can use German principles of German singing to apply to it, and it should work pretty well, actually. All right. Sing me the first phrase one more time.
Eddie Beofu heaven queen.
Okay, this first phrase has like everything in it. The first phrase is hard, but it also, like, once you nail that first phrase, everything else is going to fall into place. Because what's happening right now is it feels like your voice is connecting and disconnecting and connecting and disconnecting as you go through that phrase, especially as you go up for that H on the high note, which is just, God, don't get me started on singing H on a high note. So when we are dealing with German, and I assume it's very similar for Middle English, there are certain principles that are really important. We tend to bring a lot of the harsh guttural sounds a little bit forward. So like we use, instead of h, we usually go with h, where it's right up there in the front part of the palate. The hard palate is where that sits. We tend to close our A's. So instead of doing an open we do an A, which is more like that Canadian sounding high positioned A. It is possible to bring all of those sounds forward so that they really work for you instead of working against you. But what we really want to avoid is a lot of sounds that are being produced in the back of the throat. I noticed a lot of words that are basically straight up German, like klingen, right? Klingen. Whenever we have a word like that, we have to deal with the L has to sit very forward, almost like the way the Irish speak in L, le, where the tongue is almost touching the front teeth instead of le, right? We don't want that back le. We want a front le. It's a different position. And if you can start to bring all of those sounds forward, you will have fewer inherent problems with your legato as you're dealing with the language. Now, when you come across an H is still tricky. But here's the thing. We basically minimize them when we sing. You do not want a lot of H in your sound. Sometimes there has to be an H. Sometimes there's no way around it. A lot of European languages don't really pronounce an H, which is much more convenient for us. But when you need to actually pronounce an H, it needs to sit in the hard palate instead of being in the back of the throat, and it needs to move really quickly, right? So, what was the line? Say the words.
Eddie Beofu heaven a queen.
Eddie Beofu heaven, right? The heaven, that's the hard part. Eddie Beofu heaven. Make it fast. Move through it as quickly as you can and keep it as forward as you can. The other thing that is really important in this opening phrase is legato. It is connecting all of those notes. Right now, you're actually like, I'm not sure if you were taking a breath or if you just took like a pause in your sound production before you went up to the high note. Do not do that. Use the bottom note to get you up to the high note. The break is in your way, and the music doesn't really allow for it. Just try and sing that first line for me one more time. Right there. Just sing those two notes for me. No, that's the interval.
Sorry, yes.
It was heaven. You sing it with the words. That was better. Okay, can you spell it for me?
Hevene. I can type it too. Here we go.
Heavy. Okay, so here's one of the things that you were having a problem with. There's an actual E in between the V and the N. Damn it, it's not a shadow vowel. I was hoping it was a shadow vowel. If it was a shadow vowel, we would drop it. But since it's not a shadow vowel, you do actually have to sing it. But V is right at the front, right? Hevne. Keep it really, really right on the tip of your lips. And do not let the sound stop in between. I want you to think about there being almost a portamento. Do you know what a portamento is?
Remind me?
It's a slide, right? Between the two notes.
Right.
That would be if I did a full portamento, it would be. Those are portamentos. I mean, that's a little over exaggerated, but that's the idea. But I want a little tiny portamento on the way up. It may feel like you're cheating, but it's going to connect that all up so much better. And I want you to do the same thing on the other jump that comes like a second later in the line. Go ahead and sing that first line one more time and try it that way.
Okay. And this is a thing that's been catching me. I'm the one who not only have I not been singing for the past years, I haven't been talking for the past 2 years. So okay.
Oh wow. You sound good. You really do. You don't sound like you haven't been singing.
Wow, I totally lost my... Thank you.
Okay, one more time. It was better, but you still didn't fully phonate that top note. Give it the full volume that it needs. Try one more time. Yes. Keep going.
Folkes fruending is bliss, måler med and might and kleine. Stop there, or?
It's fine. That is so much better. Do you feel how much better it is when you do that? Yes. Everything feels connected, and it allows you. This is a really important principle. I'm actually kind of glad to have the opportunity to bring this up. It allows you to actually emote the song, right? I have seen so many singers who think about interpretation as being over here and technique as being over here. Like they're two totally separate things that you have to tackle separately. But the truth of the matter is your technique can help your interpretation, and your interpretation can help your technique. And it's really important that we think about these things in an integrated way. Because right here, when you connect those things up, the story feels clearer. I mean, I don't even know what the words are, and I still feel more connected to the story because it doesn't feel like I'm watching you try to find where the notes sit. And instead I'm engaged in a line. And when you pull that line out, when you draw that line out, it gives you the opportunity to put subtext into what you're creating and to put emotions into what you're creating. I can't wait to hear you more in the future. I think that you have a really great voice. I'm not sure what your FOC is yet. I'm not sure if you're a mezzo or a soprano. It's hard to tell.
Typically end up singing. I do a lot of alto 1, soprano 2, depending who needs what. So
Yeah, again, choral singing has some relation to solo singing, but not as much as you think.
sure.
We'd have to really if we worked a little more in the future, I would probably do some range exercises and try to see what you sound like in the upper range and what you sound like in the lower range, because that would help to sort of pinpoint where your voice wants to live. Your middle voice is very strong. And look, the truth of the matter is, I always tell my students 80% of our time should be spent on the middle voice, because 80% of your singing is done in the middle voice. That's just how it is. And if you spend too much time at the extremes, you wear yourself out really fast. But you've got a great middle voice and really a lot to work with in there. Do you do middle period for your persona as well, or do you just like this particular music?
I hop around a lot. I pulled this up because it's the thing in the concert right now. So.
Cool. I would say, I think there's some Meistersinger music that might be really, really lovely in your voice, but also I would look at 16th century English theater music. So that would be Dowland, which everybody does, but not just Dowland. Also, Thomas Campion has some really great stuff. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of really great music in that period. You know what would be really pretty in your voice is oh my god, what is the name of that song? Hang on. Constantly pulling out various music books. I have a giant shelf of just music books and scores behind me, and also a random assortment that are just circling where I'm sitting. Hang on. Not this one. Robert Johnson, though. Robert Johnson also has some good stuff. Wait, do I not have other things in here? I thought I did. That is super irritating. Sam, where's the English Baroque and Renaissance book? Do you know?
I don't know what the books look like.
Oh wait, it's right here. I found it. Ha! English Renaissance and Baroque music. It's in here for sure. Too many different books. Have you seen But a White Lily Grow?
Ooh.
That is the song I was thinking of. Have you heard this one before?
I'm not sure. I probably have to hear it.
Okay, here's what it goes like, because I think this would be really pretty in your voice. Have you seen But a White Lily Grow? Before the earth hath smudged it. That's roughly it. I don't really sing it. I know a lot of other people who sing it, but I don't really sing the piece. But I think it'd be really pretty in your voice. I think that would be a nice one to look at. It's anonymous. It is by that extremely prolific writer, Anonymous, who has lived for thousands of years now. But I think that would be really nice for you. What else would be good for you? Nymphs and Shepherds might be good, but it's post period. Nymphs and Shepherds is late 1600s. And maybe When Laura Smiles by Philip Rossiter. Those are things you might want to take a look at. I'll keep this over here in case anybody else needs English music. We are out of time, and I've run over, as I did with literally everyone. But I hope I will see you again in the future. You have such a great instrument, and I look forward to hearing more of it.
Thank you so much.
All right. You are most welcome. All right. Who is next? There's a list. Wait. Seamus is next. We've only got 2 people left. Seamus and then Susan of Etherstone. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but Seamus is who I have up next.
Okay. I'm gonna stand up also.
I still have Muriel on my screen, which is weird. Okay, there. I'm just gonna tap you. No, that doesn't work. All right. All right, Seamus, talk and let's see if it works this time and puts you
Right.
on
Okay.
the
If I
screen.
talk, it should come to the top of the screen.
Yes, there we go. It finally worked. All right. Hi, Seamus. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I also did not know we were doing songs, but I'm really glad that we are. I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the extra step in this class. So many classes are just basic, and that's great, but it's nice to have one that goes a little bit farther. So thank you.
No problem. I'm happy to get to do this. I love teaching this class. I feel like I get to know so many interesting people and beautiful voices. It makes me very happy. All right, I'm going to put the timer on. What would you like to sing?
Okay. Well, I'm working on Okay Felice Giorno.
Oh, sure. Remind me who composed that?
Giulio Caccini.
Giulio Caccini. The brother of the Francesca Caccini, who I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Do you?
I think I may actually. Hang on. I think I have a music.
Do you mind to be recorded? That's fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
All right. I believe I actually have the music for this, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. And go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay. Can I have a D?
Did you ask for a note? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Can I hear a D?
Yeah.
Okay, felice giorno, okay, lieto ritorno, raffiva il cor già spento, quantan dolcezza sento. O mia luce, mia vita, o mia gioia infinita, o mi gioia infinita.
Very good. This is a great piece of music, and this is a very challenging piece of music. So first of all, I commend you for taking on something that is actually quite a challenge. There's a lot that's going really well for you. None of it sounds strained. It feels like it's fitting pretty comfortably in your voice, although I think it may be a little on the high side for you. It's not in a bad way. You've got a nice ring up there in your upper notes. So two things, not for this moment, but just long-term, practice just like counting and clapping this. The rhythms are a little bit weird and tricky. And there were a few times when I think the rhythms were a little fuzzy when you were doing it. Okay. Just something to work on sort of long-term. I want to actually hone in on the really hard part since we've got such a limited time. And I want to go ahead and look at the runs because the runs are what make this piece especially challenging, right? We've got we went a little flat, so let's find those notes. So obviously that's about down an octave for you. So just spento. That's very uncomfortable for me down the octave. So I will probably sing it in my octave while we're working. But I really, when we have these types of passages, how do you approach it? What's your process when you look at these passages? Do you just try to sing all the notes as they're written, or do you do something else?
I've been trying to do them in the groups of 16th notes. So like for each beat, trying to think of the note on the beginning of each beat and trying to keep those together. Sure.
So I'm going to give you another technique that is going to help you when you're working through these passages. These are passages that we call Fioratura passages, which basically means florid. Hang on one second while I actually want to pull out something so that I remember all the steps here. This is one of those things, when you do stuff yourself, you sometimes skip steps, but when you're teaching it, you like to get all the steps exactly right. And there is a right way to do this one. Hang on. Let me find this section. I'm looking for a very specific thing. No, none of that. Agility and Fioratura. Here we are. All right. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to divide it into pulses. And when we talk about dividing it into pulses, what we're actually talking about is the beats. So when we look at this passage, there are, in the first one, there are 3 pulses. Right? Do you see how that works? It's just the first note of each of those groupings. And on the second one, on the Mia Gioia, it's Mi Gioia, right? When we just look at those passages. So the first thing we do is we practice singing them on a detached vowel. And the detached vowel, usually we go for the one that's in the passage. So here we would go, just sing for me. Where's that? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so right off the bat, we have just discovered one thing, which is that the reason you were a little flat is because it is too high for you, and we should bring it down a little bit. Okay. That's okay. Are you a baritone, would you say?
Yes, I would say I'm a baritone.
Because that's not a problem at all. Yeah, when you're looking at this kind of music, art music, unlike musical theater or opera, you really should feel free to transpose it wherever you want it to be. In this case, let's... Oh God, I hate transposing so much.
Me too, I get it.
But let's bring it down. Let's try bring it down a step. Let's try that. Oh my God, yes, so much better. Okay, so right off the bat, first thing you need to know is you need this lowered 1 full step.
Okay.
1 full step down is going to bring you from the key of F to the key of E flat, which is a much more annoying key, but it sounds way better in your voice. And
okay.
In the SCA, you're usually singing a cappella anyway, so who cares? All right, so after we've done the pulses, which you should keep practicing, we're going to do it again, only this time we're going to sing it legato. So, let's find those notes again. Try it that way, legato like that. Good. Now the next thing we do is we sing each pulse by itself. That is the step that you jumped to on your own, but we're going through this just in a slightly more systematic way right now, just on this one passage. And you can use the same system when you're learning longer and more complicated passages. Right. So this time we're going to separate it into each beat and sing all the notes. So we're going to go There you go. Good. And then you're a little under the pitch on it, so you got to watch that. Now, the trick here is that instead of just singing them separately the way we just did, what we actually want to do is we want to start fostering the connections between those groupings. And we're going to do that by singing one section plus the next note, which means we're going to start with, oh.
Oh. Can I hear the first note?
Oh.
Oh.
It's a little higher. Oh.
Oh. Oh. Oh. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take a deep breath. You are ending on the right note. You're just starting a little low. So first match this pitch. Oh.
Oh.
There you go. Oh.
Oh. Oh.
There you go. And then you're going to go, oh.
Oh. Oh.
There you go. Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the wrong note. That was wrong. There you go. Oh. Is that right? No, it's. I'm sorry. I looked at my transposition skills apparently suck, but it should have been oh, which is what you sang. So,
Okay.
We're sort of running out of time, but what you're going to do to keep learning those is that next you're going to do 2 pulses at a time. So you're going to go oh, and then you're going to go oh, so that you can practice. What you're doing is you're building up the connections between those notes. And finally, when that has all come together, then you're going to combine all of the pulses. And then at that point, you'll be singing it slowly, and then you're going to bring it up to speed. And that is how we approach Fioratura passages. The truth of the matter is, on O Che Felice Giorno, you never have more than like one measure of a Fioratura passage. So this process is going to go by real fast. Right. But when you have longer Fioratura passages, which do come up in our period music, this is a godsend, because the way that you have to navigate your way through those sections is by finding all of those, the most important pulses, right? When you start singing really like what we would call coloratura passages, really fast passages, this kind of process is what makes it possible to get through it, right? For example, let me think of something. Oh, what is the key for dopo note? I've got it right over here. This is Handel, which is post-period, but, oh, and I just knocked something down. Beautiful job I did there. All right. Dopo note, here we are. I was right. So I've got a passage here that goes, right? It's a pain in the ass passage. I hate singing it. But when you have to do that kind of thing, then when you go through this process step by step, which seems really boring and annoying when you're doing it, it really clarifies the notes. I have not sung that song in a really long time, so please forgive me. It really helps you to clarify those notes, because we want those passages to go by in a way that feels crisp and precise. That's what we're aiming for on those passages. Right. You got a great instrument. You got to make sure that you sing things in the right key for yourself. The truth of the matter is there are more higher voices than there are lower voices. There's more sopranos, there's more tenors, baritones are more rare than tenors. The result of that is that when things are just being sung by a group, they will tend to be a little high for you. right?
Yep.
It's just where people tend to position things. So don't be afraid to move things around until they fit your voice the way they should. Your voice is in charge, not the music.
Okay.
I look forward to hearing more from you in the future. You're really great.
So thank you.
No problem. All right, we've got one person left, I believe, and that is Susan of Etherstone or Etherstone. I don't know how to pronounce that.
I don't know either. So
That's fabulous. I love you already. All right.
because
So
that's
where
a castle one of my ancestors owned in England, and I have no idea how it was pronounced.
Good.
I heard it pronounced
So where
both ways.
do you come to it from?
I'm from Rockford, Illinois. What did you ask? I've
That's what I
only
asked.
sung in choirs, never sung solo, never had a voice lesson. All I ever heard was, when choir directors telling you things. It took me a long time to figure out how to breathe from my diaphragm. Because they could say to do it, and I'd say, okay, I'd love to do it, but I don't know how. Until someone just said, put your hand on your stomach, where your diaphragm is, and breathe. I thought, oh, now I breathe that way just normally. So
Good.
So I never had a voice lesson. I'm close to 70, haven't had much singing in the last year except for Falsa Musica with Elias. So I'm going to sing the first verse of In Dulci Jubilo. I play the psaltery, but in the bardic circles, with my original sound on, they still can't hear it, no matter how I practice. So no matter how hard I pluck the strings and everything, and people can hear it 2 rooms away, they can't hear it. So I'm going to try to sing this. I'm pretty nervous. I have anxiety issues, but I'll try.
I completely understand. What I'm going to say to you is this is a safe space. Do you want us to turn the video off or the
No, you
recording
can
off?
do it. Nobody's going to blackmail me with this recording, so I don't care.
Well, take a deep breath and just know that you are in a place that is full of support.
And I do love to sing. I do love to sing. So could you give me an F, the F above the middle C? Dulce jubilo, nützlich und unzeitfroh, unser Herzen wohnhaft, lädt in Präsepio und leuchtet aus die Sonne, matros in gremio, Alpha et
You're doing a lot very very well for solo singing. I'm actually really impressed that your background is entirely choral and you're singing in that way. You've got a nice lift. You've got I hear the soft palate raised. All of that is working really, really well for you. You've got a good clean sense of pitch and a beautiful vibrato and a good quality of sound. The main thing that I'm noticing is tension in your jaw. That's what I'm seeing the most that I think is getting in your way as you get started. I want you to really, it's a complicated balancing act because we want to think about releasing the jaw. But sometimes if we think about releasing the jaw too hard, we can create new tension from that. And we don't want to do that. We want to think about just finding that, that really super relaxed. I want it to be like you went to the dentist and they did some work on your lower teeth and they shot your lower jaw full of Novocaine. And you can't hold your jaw up, right? I want you to try approaching the song one more time and try it with the jaw just like hanging loose. And think about making the confidence with the upper part of your mouth, not the lower. Here's your pitch again.
Okay. In dulce jubilo, nunc in ut unset unser Sonnen Wohl, leit in Precipio, und leuchtet aus die Sonne, matris in gremio, alpha et all.
Oh, that was so much better. You have such a good voice. I can't believe you've never sung solo.
I
You
have
are you're
occasionally, but in my church choir, and I say I have sung solos in my church choir, but if you heard my church choir, you would know why I'm singing solos. It's kind of like a big fish in a little pond.
You know, it's okay. We all come at music from whatever angle we come at it. And church choirs sometimes are a lot of people who are in it because they love it and not necessarily because they have a lot of musical experience. But you're very good. Your voice sounds much younger than you are. You should know that. You have a youthful quality to your voice,
I
which
would
is
tell
really
people if
excellent
I
because it means
sound
that
like I'm 90 years old, you know, real quavery, you know, let me know because I'd want to stop. I don't want to assault people's ears.
you don't. You don't. You have a really good vibrato. You sound like you're in your 40s, which is a real prime time for most singers. I think you're a mezzo. I think you're probably on the heavier side of a mezzo, actually. I think you've got a big voice in there. We're seeing a little bit of it. It doesn't feel like you're restraining it, but it doesn't feel like you're like giving us all that there is, certainly.
I mostly would sing soprano in the church choir because I'm the only one that can get up above an E without sounding like someone stepped on something. But I really don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think you're a mezzo. I feel fairly confident in saying that. Most mezzos can sing above the staff for sure. And in the opera world, mezzos are expected to have at least an A or a B flat in general. But most of us are most comfortable if we're singing between like E and E, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's our happy place between E and E. Although you've got a nice chest voice too. Your voice rings beautifully when you get to the bottom. I want to talk to you about singing some solo repertoire because your voice deserves to shine on its own. You know what I think you should look at? I think you should look at Hildegard von Bingen's music.
Yay.
I think you would sound really.
When we saw the Musica, we were begging our director to do Hildegard von Bingen, but it kind of fell apart before we got to her.
Well, there's some really good solo material. I think that you should look around. I don't know her material as well as others. Truthfully, if you want to pick someone's brain about Hildegard von Bingen, I highly recommend Iselda de Narbonne, who is from Atlantia.
She's the director of Falsa Musica. Elias and I know her.
Well, there we go. So you know Iselda. Iselda knows Hildegard better than anyone I know, and I actually am planning on poking her and making her teach me some Hildegard too, because there's some beautiful stuff in there. And I think your voice would be really well suited to that music. I think it would be really great. I also think you should look at some of the cantigas de Santa Maria. It's just good to have some of the cantigas in your book anyway, because there's always an instrumental group playing one of the cantigas and you can usually jump in and sing with them, which is really fun. I don't know which cantigas to recommend. There's like hundreds of them. I usually just listen to albums of other people doing cantigas and I go, oh, I like that one. Let me go find that one. Let's do an exercise. We've got about 2 minutes left with you. And I like what you did with the song. I think that song doesn't challenge you. So it doesn't give us as much to like move forward with you because it's not pushing your technique in any way. But let's do an exercise. I had to
grab it at the last minute to find something.
Of course. No. It's great. And I like what we did with it. But let's take our last 2 minutes and let's do an exercise. Let's do something that will be useful for you. Let me think. Let's do an arpeggio. We're going to do an octave arpeggio. And we're going to go Nah, I don't like that. E-A-R. E-A-R. That's what we're going to do. Good. I want you to think about connecting all of those notes in between, and it's okay if there's a little bit of a slide between the notes.
Now my voice is
Just going higher. It's okay. Try something louder.
I know
Very
that
good.
doesn't.
Now, I'm noticing that you're curling your lips in a little bit. And I want you to think about bringing the lips back out. Instead of doing that, I want you to bring them out like a little fishy. Yeah.
Fish. Okay. I don't know if I did the right vowel, but
I don't know what vowels we're doing either. Pick a vowel you like. It's all good. Very good. Especially think about a portamento from the 5 up to the 8. Very good. Try to relax that jaw. Very good. We're going to do 2 more. Good. One last one. Very good. Very good. You have such a good instrument. There's so much you can do with that.
Can I say one thing? I'm glad to hear that. Several years ago, I had to drop out of all these community choirs. I was on a blood pressure med that gave me shortness of breath. You know, and finally a doctor told me, oh, you need this, but it never really came back to where it was better, but it never really came back.
I understand. I totally understand. Look, as we're coming to a close with everybody, this is kind of a good way to bring it about. I want to say, the thing about singing is that because our body is our instrument, when we have physical challenges, they tend to be manifest in the voice. I have a very serious genetic illness, and I'm in a wheelchair because I can't keep my joints in socket. Super fun. And it affects my singing. Of course it does. How could it not? When my back hurts, it's extremely hard for me to get good breaths, right? And if I'm having a high pain day, I find it difficult to do sustained passages, and sometimes I have more tightness in my top than I want. As singers, one of the things that we have to do is we have to learn to be at peace with the fact that we have limitations, and that sometimes those limitations will be manifest in our voice, and that's okay. Every single person who sang today, you all have a real gift. You all have an instrument that you can use in beautiful ways, and you have to be kind to yourself, and you have to remember that how you feel physically or emotionally is going to affect your singing. You have to remember that you can't just go forever, and that as you get older, you need to take more breaks, and you need to be more conscientious and compassionate about the way you deal with your own body. We are a kind of athlete as singers because we are using our body in a way that requires a lot of work and technique and sustained effort, and our muscles can be in shape or out of shape, and there's all sorts of things. As athletes, we have to observe our bodies and what we can do to keep our bodies in the best condition that they're able to be in. So what that means is make sure you drink enough water, especially when you're singing. If you're like me and you're on medications that dry you out further, then you have to take extra steps, more than just drinking water. I have a little machine called a vocal mist that does like a saline mist that I use every single day in order to hydrate my vocal cords and to make sure that I keep things supple and that I'm not singing on dry cords, which can be really dangerous. When you sing at SCA events, you have to be aware that the environment is going to affect you and that you cannot go to Penzic and sing 4 hours every single night outside around a fire and think you're still going to have your voice at the end of Penzic. You're not. It's gonna go. I promise. You have to be aware that just like you would be careful with an expensive guitar or a harp or whatever, you have to be careful with your vocal apparatus, because this is what we've got. And last but not least, one little bit of very specific SCA advice. Try not to sing when you're super drunk. It's there's a tendency to both have dry chords and to oversing when you're drunk, and that can be damaging. But if you are around the fire and you've had too much smoke and you're having a hard time with your sound just a little bit, this is my personal SCA secret. I have found that a very small glass of a very thick cordial does wonders for coating your throat and making it easier to sing. So find that person in your Brewers Guild who makes the really good, like, raspberry cordial and bribe him for a bottle. I promise it will be worth it. All right, I am basically done, but I'm going to open it up to questions if anybody has any further questions they want to ask.
I would love to hear if you have any. So, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome here, we may be in similar boats or the same one. Do you have any particular tips for dealing with tight neck muscles and everything that goes along with the muscle tension?
Oh my God. Yeah. So yes, I do. I have vascular EDS with hypermobile crossover. So yes, we are in the same boat.
Yeah.
And EDS sucks. Yes. All right. Zebras unite. I thought you might recognize those symptoms. It's a pretty specific symptom list. When you can't keep your hips in socket, you probably have EDS.
Yeah. I subluxed a shoulder last week.
A lot of other people also deal with neck tension and instability problems. So it relates across more than just the EDS board. But here's what I'm going to say. First of all, I use a heating pad a lot on my neck. It helps a lot. I just sit with a heating pad really a very large portion of the time. Second of all, I have a really good CBD balm that I use on my neck that's pretty effective. That also has like arnica and some other things. So it's like a mild icy hot, but also has the benefits of CBD. And I use that on my neck, especially when it gets really out of control tight. I wish I had more tricks because I deal with this all the time and I don't have really great tricks. I have the things that I've figured out how to do over the years, but it's, when you have instability in joints, you tend to overcompensate by the muscles tightening to try to hold the joints together. And then as soon as that happens, you have this whole mess of tight that just like draws its way up your body. Meditation helps sometimes. It does. I can only do guided meditations these days. I can't do, I know that for some people, mindfulness meditation works really well for them. I can't do mindfulness meditation because it makes me too aware of my pain. It's just like, it does not work for me because I do not want to feel my pain. I want to be disassociated from my body. Thank you very much. But that's the best advice I could give. I wish I had better. Any other questions?
Anything that you find particularly interferes with singing, or things to watch out for, or?
In general, I mean, I don't know. I think hydration is like one of the biggest keys. I think we're so frequently underhydrated and we don't realize it. And if you're taking medications, it's even more true because you almost can never drink enough water to rebalance that. So I think hydration is a major key. And I guess I'm going to say the other thing is fear. If you know Dune, I'm going to say fear is the mind killer. Right? Because when we are afraid before we sing, we tense up all of the muscles that we need to be loose in order to sing well. And then we create this sort of compound cycle where we're not happy with how we sing, so we get more stressed when we're singing. And there's this constant tightening, and that doesn't serve us as singers. So whatever trick you can find internally to get yourself past the fear, I think that is really, really key. I think, and I know that that's easier said than done, but I think that 9 times out of 10, when you have a hard time hitting a high note, it's because you're afraid of the high note. So you tense up before you try to hit the high note, and then the high note doesn't come out. But if you were able to relax, the high note would be there, right? I was working with a student of mine who's a coloratura soprano recently, and we were doing an exercise we did today where we go, and I was bringing her all the way up, and because she has some slight pitch issues, and it's easier for her to hear it if I sing it for her first. So I was singing all the way up the scale, and I brought her up to like a C sharp or a D, and sang it like easy. And afterwards, right after I sang it, I was like, wait a second, that was a really good D. I don't sing a D that well. That's not easily in my range. Right? And it's because the fear wasn't there, because I wasn't focused on how I sounded. I was just trying to give her a pitch. So sometimes tricking yourself is really useful. I had a voice teacher who told me when I was having trouble with, I sing the role of Azucena in Il Trovatore, and there's this ridiculous moment when you just have to sing a B flat. And I don't mean like you sing a melody and then it goes up to a B flat. I mean, you're singing and you take a breath for a measure and then you just sing a B flat. Just like, that's it. Like you just sing it out of nowhere, right? It is a bitch! And you've been singing for 2.5 hours by that time, and you're so tired when you get there. And my voice teacher at the time was like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pretend that you're a soubrette, which is like a light soprano, a young soprano voice. She was like, just sing it like you're a soubrette. Just pretend you're a soubrette and sing it. And I did, and I was like, oh, that was really easy. Why was that so easy? And the answer is, because I tricked myself. So this is genuine advice. Figure out how to trick your brain. Figure out how to tell yourself that it's not scary for whatever reason. And it will get less scary as you do it, because as you gain confidence, as you learn that the note really is there, it will get easier and easier. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful. All good stuff.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Yes, I have osteoporosis, arthritis, and then I'm allergic to dust. So I always have this constant post-nasal drip. If you didn't see me before I was singing, I was sucking on cough drop after cough drop after cough drop and downing a lot of water. And that's why I had to drop out of the choirs, because you can't be sneaking cough drops constantly, surreptitiously when can see, you know.
You know, you totally can. Singers do it all the time. Singers who have church jobs, they just sit in the back like all the time, even when they're not supposed to for various reasons. So here's the thing. I'm constantly stuffed up too, like constantly. It never goes away. There's two things I have to say about it. One of them is that when your technique moves out of your nose, it doesn't matter as much. It's annoying, but it doesn't actually affect your voice as much as you think it's gonna, unless you have a really nasal technique. If your technique is, and you don't have a nasal technique. The other thing is, as far as the throat goes, you want to keep yourself moisturized. Drink hot tea with lemon, or just hot water with lemon and honey. Honey is really good for coating the throat. And I would recommend for you that you look into the vocal mist, which is the thing I was talking about. I think the website is just vocalmist.com, but if you look it up, it's called literally vocal mist, but like one word, vocal mist. And it is a little machine. It looks like this. And I put water into the top, or not water, I put saline solution that you buy from them into the top thing. And there's two different handles. Like you can use this or you can use something that doesn't have the full mask, but I think the mask is easier. And I just go like that. You turn it on and it's not hot. One of the keys to this is not a steamer. It doesn't make hot steam. It makes cool vapor. And I find that when I use it, in addition to moisturizing the throat, it actually has a tendency to clear out my sinuses and to clear out whatever's going on in my nose. So I do it right before I sing a lot of times. And I have tissues close in hand because sometimes it gets messy. So that's my advice on that. Any other questions?
Just
all right.
I wanted to let you know how happy you have made us all today.
Oh, thank you.
Incredible class, incredible advice, and just you giving us your time, your sharing your talent with us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, I'm super impressed. I'm not gonna sing it.
You're absolutely welcome. It was a pleasure. You guys have all been super fun to work with. I am going to go now because it's been 3 hours and I'm really hungry. So I'm going to go eat something. Love to you all. And I hope I will see you in classes and such in the future. If you're in Atlanta or the East, come poke me. And, you know, big events too. I won't be at Gulf Wars this year, but probably next year again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everybody, for coming to the class. Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, and you can all friend me on Facebook if you want. I'm Krishna Alexandra. I accept friend requests from SCA people. Feel free to like shoot me questions or whatever. I'm very easy to get in touch with. All right. Bye, everybody.
I will
Thank you.
post the link to the class.